Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And this episode is about having your needs met in marriage, and it's not as simple as you think.
If you think about it, part of why we decide to partner up with someone is to build a great life together and to mutually meet each other's needs. In a sense, that's part of the agreement. If you choose to walk down the aisle and promise things to each other as you get married, in a sense, you are promising to care about meeting each other's needs, but it's very easy to lose sight of that when you get into the daily grind and your responsibilities, and there's a lot of focus on the kids, the household, work, etc. So this weekend, we actually led our in-person couples workshop in Arizona. It was amazing. One of my favorite workshops that we've ever done, and we've been doing these a long time. And couples traveled in. One couple all the way from Hawaii came from this paradise to the desert. Another couple, it was amazing. They flew in that morning, like 5 a.m. flight to get there, and we're flying home that evening after the workshop because they have young kiddos at home and they wanted to get back, but they made it happen. That is so inspiring to me.
Yeah, it was to me too. I talked with a couple that were from Missouri. They had, it wasn't probably the first time, but they had seen the workshop date that Tuesday of the workshop.
Yeah.
So it was like
days before.
a week ago today. The workshop was on Sunday. And they made the entire plans to, fly to Arizona, book a hotel, be there just within a few days.
Yeah.
And it was powerful, all the takeaways from the workshop. And one we really wanted to go into here today was the big takeaway about unmet needs in marriage. Now, as you were laying out for us here, generally speaking, a goal in marriage is to each have high levels of satisfaction. And for us, we lay that out in 9 core areas of a relationship.
Yeah.
Now, we did a podcast on that a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it's a part of our family meeting template and guide. So the idea is that you have these areas and each of you having a high level of satisfaction, in those areas. And so from there, you start to get into a place of needs being unmet or lowering your satisfaction when the particular needs within those areas begin to go unmet.
From the front of the stage, we kind of have a stage, I challenged everyone in this certain section that we were doing. We were going through some exercises, and I really looked at everyone. I paused and I said, no, you have to get this. You have to want to meet your partner's needs. You could communicate all day long. We could take you through all the exercises in the world about expressing your needs in a constructive way and how to listen to each other, improve your communication. But truly, you have to want to hear what they're saying and do your best to meet them. And I said this, most people aren't requesting outlandish needs. Like, they're not too much to ask for. Now, are there nuances to what needs might come from more of a codependent place? Sure. Or from a place where we have to put it into perspective of everything else going on in life? Of course, that context matters. But usually, when we're sitting there, we're talking to a couple, what they're asking for is not crazy. It isn't too much. And that's both sides, what each person. And we're going to talk about some of the places that you can get stuck as we go further into this. But I want you to think about that. Do you want to meet your partner's needs? Because that mindset is being a team player. Truly, if you think about it.
So if the goal then is really to live your life, to get done the activity and the management of life, well, you need to do that while paying attention to the level of satisfaction that you each have. That's why the family meeting check-in is so great. So you'll start to notice that your satisfaction goes down, and you might not notice a short or little decrease. But you'll notice that there are little more upsets, maybe they're more frequent. But as we moved into this exercise in the couples workshop, right, it's about understanding the underlying needs or expectations we won't give a big differentiation between these two. Needs maybe being more core emotional type needs, where expectations are kind of like preferences and activity, you could say. So we're not going to make a distinction there. So it's expectation or need. And what you need to realize is that that's where your upset first and foremost comes from. That a core need or expectation is unmet, or at least it's perceived to be as such. So then from there, it's like, okay, well, this gets interesting because we are all more present to the negative emotion, the upset, the frustration, the disappointment that is associated with the need, but we're not as present to the actual need itself.
Yes.
So then what we tend to do is express, and we don't use this word very often, we express the undesirability of feeling the associated negative emotion, which might verbally come out as a complaint. I don't like what you're doing. Shouldn't have said it that way.
Or take it out on them. It could be expressed in the heat of the moment, like an argument's occurring. And so you say it in less productive ways.
So you're then directing your communication and your verbalization. I'm saying that specifically. I'll say why in a second. But that's what people think is communicating or being assertive. Okay, and so we really need to make the switch to something's happening. You have this negative emotion. You don't like it. And so that's what you verbalize. But assertiveness, as we then further defined in the workshop, is not just verbalizing all that, but it's having the self-reflection and awareness to connect that feeling of negative emotion, the upset, the reason you're defensive or frustrated, and connecting that to, well, what is the unmet need or expectation here?
Yeah.
Then you can proceed forward in an effective way of communicating from your own perspective. Hey, partner, though I've been very distant from you and I've been standoffish or I've been short with you, I realize that where that's coming from is I had an expectation of more support or more respect or kindness. But I realize in this moment or moments ago that I never clearly expressed that was a need that I had.
As I was walking around the workshop, there were a couple things I observed about that. I noticed that some people struggled to actually go beyond the feeling and identify the need, right? And not the need in a not format, in the negative. I need you to not do that. But in a positive sense, or an affirmative sense, what would it look like? And then some people just even struggle to identify the need altogether, maybe because they suppress their needs or they're just in more of like a go mode. And I notice that with men in particular, it's like they're more focused on the practicality of life and the things to get done. And so they can almost like deny or ignore having emotional needs in a sense within the relationship. It's like, well, we're functioning well, so that's good, right? Or we haven't had an argument in a little bit, so that's a measure of things being good. But we all have needs in a marriage, and some of them are practical needs, whether that is about reliability and really taking on your roles and responsibilities and not having to bring it up to each other, right? I need you to be a team player and not have me remind you of this. So there's some practical action-based needs.
So let me connect that then.
Sure.
Because that's the I won't say last part. It's the next part of this process. And here you are expressing, vulnerably and honestly that, hey, I realize I just really have this need for feeling more desired, more of a priority, more support. More loved, certainly. And I think we're just not as used to being that open or even thoughtful about ourselves and our need. So that's like a win. But what we don't then do is connect that to action. Like, what does that mean to you specifically? And what is something that, in this case, your partner could do that you're going to present to them as a request, and see if you can both agree to that change in action or just a new action in general to meet that need. So we simply call that making an agreement. And unless you connect that to an agreement, then what usually happens is, man, you had this moment of insight about yourself and the need. You were vulnerable and you expressed that to your partner. But if you left it too open and it's too vague and you're not really sure, your partner's not really sure exactly what that means, and it's just too conceptual, like, okay, yeah, I'll support you more. I'll be more kind and more loving. Well, there's nothing there to really sink your teeth into. So you're just going to move out of that conversation like, oh, that was good. There was understanding, there was vulnerability, but there was nothing there to link to actually do differently. So you just go about sort of business as usual. And then in a couple of days, and this is where I got really straightforward.
You were straight up in the workshop.
In the workshop. And I said, this is a major problem because it almost gets worse at this point, because your partner is going to come back to you in a couple of days and it's going to be very subjective. Something else is going to happen that's then going to have it be perceived that the need is continuing to not get met, respect, and then you're just going to verbalize the complaint again. But it's worse because I just told you this 4 days ago that what I needed was more love. And here I am in another upset and I don't feel loved.
And nothing's changed.
But right at this moment, it's still on you because you needed to assert and bring forward what it is specifically that you are actually asking for. What action, what particular change were you looking for that your partner can now really look at and say, okay, I understand what I can now do here going forward.
But here's where it requires being a team, because you just said, right, it's still on you as the communicator. However, marriage and communication, team game. And so you as the listener, if you're hearing your partner's needs, because we hope both of you are hearing this podcast episode, on the receiving end, you have to be honest about what you're saying yes to. So you hear your partner, they express the need for more support with the kids, and they list ways for, I feel most supported when you do this and you do this and you do this. So you give the communicators giving the examples. On the receiving end, you can't say yes or I'll do that out of compliance, because then you are really going to disappoint your partner. And like Aaron said, it's only going to get worse because they expressed this to you. So marriage is a team game. Communication is a team game. The speaker and the listener, on the listener end, you have to be real and be honest. We talked about integrity in the last podcast episode. If you say, I got it, I'm on it, I will, however you are affirming to them that you are going to put that into action, you're putting your word into that. And that follow through is so key.
Yeah, I didn't realize how apropos it is that we're having this subject be the one that follows the integrity one from last week. But as a way to really look at how to better get your needs met, these are the first steps. And if you're doing that well, then at least you can, I guess from a visual, like check this step off. And if things are not progressing and the need continues to not get met and you've done all these things, well, we are clearly in the space of needing some accountability to integrity. So like, what's going on with your partner? Are they complying? Is there an issue with structure, with reminders, with commitment, going to those places of word? Like, where's now the breakdown? So that's a good way to just kind of step yourself through. All right, it's about getting needs met, but I haven't been assertive, didn't really know what the need actually was, didn't make an agreement. So here we are doing that. Like, let's make sure that's at least happening first and foremost.
Another interesting takeaway from talking to couples at the workshop was a lot of them realized they wanted the same thing, or quote unquote needed the same thing. It might look different what things move the needle for each person. So taking categories, for example, of feeling like their communication is really strong. Well, for one person, it might be about not having such intense arguments. That's the needle mover for them. For the other person, it's, hey, I need you to just more so communicate on a daily basis, like what you have going on, and make sure we're on the same page about the schedule. And so the needle movers for each person within the category, in a sense, look different. But when you boil it down, they wanted or needed the same thing. And so a lot of couples are like, you know what? We're on the same team. We both want to feel a sense of partnership. We both want to feel united and connected. And although my partner is a different person, and you have to remember that, you married someone that's not an exact replica of you. So if you're only acting in accordance with what you need and want in the relationship, you're not taking into account what they want and need. So remember, it's like, I need to know what moves the needle for them.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that came up today as we were talking, and I was listening to another podcast, it reminded me that also why this isn't as simple, but even as we're talking, you're probably like, oh, it's not that simple. There's a pretty explicit process in this. It gets a little bit more complicated when you think that you don't really know what you actually need. Mm-hmm. Now, we say that, and I even thought about this today. I'm like, well, I think I'm pretty sure. But here's the example from the workshop. So we do an exercise around this, and I went over to the couple, and we were having them look at places of upset or negative emotion as the first place to link to stepping through this process. And what they were clear about was they were having an experience of financial stress. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, then what is it that you need or want? And it's like, well, the first thing that they said was, well, freedom. It's like, okay, well, yeah, that's the opposite of like financial stress, so financial freedom. But it took me saying, okay, well, let's dive more into that. And so it did take a few minutes, but even after the financial freedom, we got to, it was actually about stability. So even at that, I realized whatever any of us individually would say, like if we felt rushed, if we were just trying to communicate something quickly, if it was vulnerable, we don't always say everything as precise, as accurate as it could be, and not because we're holding anything back. I just don't know that we think about what we actually need deep enough. Because again, if you just ask, what they needed was, well, we got a lot going on. We have a lot of stress. We just need financial freedom. It's like that would send you down a level of agreements and a different set of actions. But to really understand that, and I think she was the one that thought of it, she's like, well, I'm really looking for stability. Well, stability is a much different need than financial freedom. And that would lead you to a different set of requests for agreements and follow-up action.
Yeah.
So way different. So I just think each of us understanding that we don't even really know what we need. And the last thing about this is you also have to consider the timeline in which you're thinking about what you think you need. Because what you need can be impulsive. Like, oh, what I think I need is this right now to fix this solution or to avoid this pain. But there's also needs that are going to be on a short to medium to long-term basis. So, yeah, what do you really need right now? Like, do you need to quit a job? Do you need to invest in this one thing? Do you need to put your kid into, let's say, a daycare or Montessori? It's like, well, that might meet a very short-term need. I don't know why I went with the school analogy, but you just have to consider, well, what's a longer-term need is for how we guide our child to be resourceful and creative and respectful. Something like that.
Yeah, it's
well,
longer
okay,
term.
if you thought about that being the need, which is much longer term, then all of a sudden maybe you don't make the same agreement. Maybe you don't take the same action as putting your child into a particular school. So really knowing what you need, you have to ask the question, well, who is the you? And the you on what basis? Am I just needing something now? Am I thinking about the potential future version of myself or that we could be as a couple? Then you start to see how those needs could really be changing. So you're certainly not present to that level of thinking. in these moments that you have an upset and we just verbalize the complaint,
Yeah.
right? So if nothing else, just realize maybe you really don't know what's actually best for you or what you really need. Because again, long, medium, short term. And what have you been actually communicating? Are you communicating any of those core needs? Is it impulsive? Is it just a complaint? Have you been holding it back because you don't want to have a conflict? So hopefully that just paints the picture of you just really thinking more about what you actually need. What's the basis? Do I share it from my own perspective? Do we make agreements? And at that point, it's like, all right, if you've done all that work, then we can have a conversation about your partner side of things. I just think it just takes, there's a lot there. And how quick is it for any of us to say, well, here's what my partner needs to change. But we just spent 40 minutes talking about the depth of understanding your own needs and expressing it. And then unless you've done that at a minimum, what do we really need to be talking about your partner changing as of yet? Oh, they don't follow through. They're not accountable. They need to do this or that. It's like, well, we can have that conversation. But again, you need to do all this stuff that we're talking about here.
Yeah, and what Aaron's really inviting you into is that reflection and discernment. And I know that social media posts can, in a sense, almost make us think that we need something within a relationship when that might not be true for you or true in this moment within the context of what's going on in your life and your relationship right now. And so taking that time to reflect. And so speaking of that, actually, what you just described made me think about how powerful the 30-day couples challenge is because of the questions that it has you ask yourself and each other to get this clarity and to see that you can meet each other's needs by having more of that understanding and by asking better questions. So for those of you who have not done our 30-day couples challenge, we actually have two versions. So there's the level 1, which is the prioritizing us couples challenge, and then the level 2, which is rebuilding us. And the level 2 is really designed if you are working through a harder season of marriage where there's some repairing to do, some rebuilding to do. So the prompts are a little bit more challenging, however, extremely powerful, the themes that we focus on. And then prioritizing us is really just getting you in momentum of focusing more on filling your love accounts, communicating better, connecting more with each other, no matter how busy you are, to prioritize your relationship. So go to meetthefreemans.com/links to pick one of them because they actually both start here in just a few days on the 1st of the month. So go to meetthefreemans.com/links to pick either the level 1 or the level 2 challenge, where it's going to get you in conversation, asking these interesting conversations, learning more about each other, course correcting, and meeting each other's needs. Because the longer you're together, it really does require being intentional and being thoughtful so that you stay satisfied in the partnership. So we hope you enjoyed this episode and really thinking deeper about the needs within your partnership. Again, we're a team. We want to make sure we're both satisfied and fulfilled. Doesn't mean it's perfect all the time, but we both are putting in that effort. And that was a key word at the workshop too, that a lot of people were saying, we really have to focus on the effort that we're putting in the relationship. So with that, we hope you enjoyed this episode and we will talk to you on the next one.